Hey folks, thanks for stopping by. No turning this week. I've got some tools to sharpen, so I figured I'd take the opportunity to go over how I sharpen, why I sharpen the way I do, and what tools I use. Stick around, we'll get started. Alright, before I jump in, I figured I'd talk about the two major sharpening systems that I'm aware of, and kind of what are the differences between them. You've got systems that produce a concave bevel and systems that produce a flat bevel. Typically on the concave bevel, what you've got is a rotating abrasive, and you present the tool to it at an angle so that you end up with a slight concave on the tip of the tool. The flat systems typically have abrasive that runs in a straight line, and you present the tool to it in such a way that you end up with a flat bevel on the tool. So concave systems, there's a couple of those. Well, there's quite a lot really. They're kind of further divided into wet and dry. The one that everybody knows for the wet is the Tormek, but the same thing is also made by Jet, Grizzly. I think there's also Wen. There's a couple of different manufacturers make the wet sharpening systems, and it's really a stone that slowly rotates in a bath of water, and there's a bar in front of it that you put different accessories on in order to present the tool at the proper angle or with the proper sweep if you're doing a bowl gouge. The other one, and it's probably the most popular because it's also the cheapest option, is a regular 8-inch grinder with a jig. There's the one-way Wolverine. Captain Eddie makes one. There are others, but it's basically a jig system that you put under your grinder that you then have a pocket that you put your tool into that either lets it rotate like this or sweeping from side to side if you've got a swept back grind on your gouges. On the flat side, there are a couple of different options. There's just a plain belt sander, and I know some people who use a belt sander to sharpen their non-swept-back gouges, and that's perfectly fine. There's also the Sorby system, which includes a bunch of little jigs for doing different tools. And then the oddball in this scenario is the Work Sharp, which it provides a wheel that rotates, but you're not touching the edge of the wheel, you're actually touching the surface of the wheel. It has a bar over it with tools that allow you to grind your tools. So that's kind of the two separate things, or the two major camps of sharpening, whether it's a concave bevel or a flat bevel. I started out with concave, but I quickly moved to flat, and the reason why is less catches. I don't know if it's just me and the way I learned, or if it's truism, if it's true for everybody, but I get a lot less catches with tools that have a perfectly flat bevel. The problem that I was getting was I would be riding the bevel, but then the wing of the tool would grab because it's not a continuous surface. So I chose to go flat. So let me gather my sharpening system up, and I'll kind of go over the different bits and pieces and the parts, and then we'll get started doing some sharpening. Okay, let me start with how I do my scrapers. I gathered all my scrapers together. The first time I switched over to the Sorby, I gathered all my scrapers together and found that all of them had drifted slightly from the optimal angle. So one of the nice things about the Sorby is, or any sharpening system that has repeatable jigs, is that you always get the same grind over and over and over. Previously I'd just been using a belt sander, and I would hold the tool up to the belt and set the table to it to match the bevel. At least I thought I was matching the bevel. Obviously I was getting off slowly over time. So what I did was I kind of picked the optimum angle, which was 60 degrees, and then set the table on the Sorby to 60 degrees. So this has an adjustment on the side where you can adjust the angle of the table to fixed positions. You can see the little, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there's little stops that you can move the table to different angles, repeatable angles. That being the important thing. I typically don't take a scraper to the grinder because it's removing metal unless it really needs sharpening. This one, there's no burr at all. If there is a burr and it just needs to be refreshed, I have the Veritas burr raising doohickey. Basically, it's 2 pins, and I've got it mounted on a block of wood so that I can pop it into a vise to hold it still. But you can push again, rotate against one pin and push against the other, and it will roll a bead onto it. But this one, I've used it enough that rolling a bead just doesn't work as well as it should. It takes too much pressure, too many passes on the Veritas jig. So typically for this one, I will just hold it flat to the platen, rotate it through all the way, and I need to grab a little bit of water. Most of my tools are high-speed steel. You don't want them to get so hot that they change color, so you'll see me make a pass, dump it in water, make a pass, dump it in water. So let me get some water and then we'll get sharpening a scraper. Okay, ready to go. Okay, now I've got a nice little burr. I don't know if I can see if I can get a paper towel to catch on it, but there's a nice little burr at the end of the tool, and the edge is nice and shiny. So let me grab a square scraper, and I'll show you the difference in sharpening that. This one really doesn't need sharpening, but let me quickly kind of remove the burr and color in the edge. Just to show you how it works. This one is not a truly square scraper. I've actually relieved the corners a little bit. It's just to keep the corners from digging in. So, but it's very similar as far as how you sharpen. It's just hold it up to it, and I do a little wiggle on either side just to kind of make that very slight radius. And there you go. Nice and shiny. No more Sharpie. And there's just a slight burr right on the very edge. And sometimes I'll go ahead and grind and then take it to the Veritas jig and do both, just because it's much easier to raise just the burr with a Veritas. Yeah, so that's scrapers. Let me change a few things and I'll be back and I'll show you how I do gouges. Actually, before I move on to bowl gouges and spindle gouges, I figured I would go over how I do spindle roughing gouges, because it uses a very similar setup. Because I don't have, it's not my spindle roughing gouge does not have a sweat bank grind or anything. You can do it with basically the same setup. The Sorby comes with a little block that rides in this track that will hold a tool at whatever angle you set it at, and without it being able to move side to side. So for spindle roughing gouges, that's perfect. Let me color in the bevel just to make sure I'm getting everything. nice and sharp. So now let me get set up to do bowl gouges and spindle gouges. So for spindle gouges and bowl gouges, you remove this platform and install this little pivot point here on the bottom, and that works with the sharpening jig that they have here. It's very similar to the Tormek one, but yeah, it serves a similar function. It allows you to hold it, put a tool in it, rotate it back and forth so that you get the proper grind. So let me put this one in. And here's another tip that I found makes things much easier. Is, oh, you can see it in the camera, that label maker. On all of my tools, I put a little sticker of what angle it needs to be set at. So for scrapers at 60, spindle gouges at 45, bowl gouges at 50. Some of my skews in the 20s, or like 25, or what have you. It makes it so much easier. You don't have to get out an angle gauge every time and figure out which setting it goes to. And with the Sorbet system is similar to the Wolverine in that you can set up some stops so that you always get the same angle. So let me go ahead and sharpen this gouge. Oh, and again, if it gets very hot, I'll dunk it in water just to keep it from messing with the temper. And that's all it takes. And dump that in the water. It's a little bit warm. Excuse me. So nice and shiny. All done. Wicked sharp. So that same process works for bowl gouges as well. Here's one that I've got that's set at 50 degrees. So if I pop this in, and sharpen. And that's really all it takes. Now for my fluted tools, bowl gouges especially, what I'll do after I sharpen is take a round diamond stone, this happens to be one from Rockler, and just kind of take the burr off the inside of that edge. Just very lightly. Yeah. Makes it a little bit less aggressive. A freshly sharpened tool is a thing to behold. It will dig into wood quickly and remove a lot, sometimes more than you're really ready for. So I like to kind of, it doesn't dull it, it just makes it so that it's not so aggressive. So that is spindle gouges, bowl gouges, scrapers. There's a few oddball tools like, well, not oddball for everybody, but oddball for me, like skews. I will use the platform to do skews set at a 20 or 25 degree angle. There's a few other little accessories that the Sorbet works with or comes with that make things fairly easy. Let me grab one of those. So this is a holder for carbide bits. So this end has just a screw in a hole that you can put a round or radius or square carbide cutter and hold it on the platform to sharpen it. And then this end has a cutter holder that will hold Sorbet's half round carbide cutters, but if you take off that little center section, you can hold many others. square ones will fit up under it. Let me grab one real quick. Don't worry about it. But you just hold it up against the platen and sharpen it that way. So it makes it fairly simple. But so it looks like I've got some work to do. I'm going to run through all of my tools and evaluate which ones need to be sharpened. Get that done so I can kind of start fresh. I try to sharpen as I go, but I'll often set one tool down to grab another, even though the tool that I set down needs to be sharpened. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking with me. I try to put out one of these every week or so. Next week we'll probably get back to doing some turning. Go ahead and subscribe and go ahead and hit the little notification bell if you want to get notified the next time I put a video out. Let me know what you think. Is there something I'm missing? Is there a better way to do it? Do you prefer concave over flat? And if so, tell me why. Drop me a comment. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Take care.